Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are coming to you from the beautiful and snow-covered neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Rae Rankin, celebrating Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse. Before we invite Rae in, we want to invite you to join us as we will be reading in the new year. That's right, reading in the new year. Our fun, free, virtual family literacy fair happening December 25th, Christmas Day. And you're going all the way to New Year's Day, January 1st, 2021. We're saying goodbye and good riddance to 2020, saying hello to all the hope, love, and happiness we'll be finding in 2021. We've assembled authors from all over the world. They are reading their books for you. We have performances. We have do-it-together activities. We have downloadables for offline fun. It's all happening at readinginthenewyyear.com. Be sure to go there today. Bookmark the page. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Joining us right now from the Sacramento area in the beautiful state of California. She is returning to the podcast to celebrate a brand new book, Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse. Please welcome back to the show, Rae Rankin. Rae, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great to have you back, and great to celebrate this great new book. I understand Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse is up for a pretty prestigious award.
Yeah, it is a literary nominee at the 2020 Equus Film Festival, and that will be a virtual event this year in November, and I'm pretty excited about that. Two of my other books have won awards from the film festival, so it's really exciting.
That is exciting. So tell us about this new book. Who is it for?
It's really for just about anybody, kids especially, who love horses. And it is a book about a girl who goes on this adventure to find the mysterious, legendary ghost horse. Ooh. And she has to be brave, and she has to be strong, and she has to be courageous as she's going on this adventure. But it's kind of interesting because it's who's following who, because the ghost is kind of following her through the book.
Ooh, this sounds like a lot of fun.
It is, and it was really fun to write because it's the first book that I've written. This is my fifth book that I've released, but the first one that I've really went more imaginary, if you will, that's not really based on something that's happened in life. So my first book, Cowgirl Lessons, was based on my daughter and her writing experience. And some of the other books I've written kind of are along the same lines, adventures that we've had. But Ghost Horse is pretty much my first kind of just created out of my head story.
Was that intimidating for you, writing from the garden of your imagination?
A little bit, because I was like, well, one of the things I do, I write in rhyme, and that is really hard. And then trying to get this book across and this story across in rhyme and be creative, and it was very challenging.
So it was outside of your comfort zone. A lot of times that's where some of our best growth and some of our best work comes from.
I think so. My daughter, she's partial to Cowgirl Christmas, the one story I wrote, but I still think this one, Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse, is my favorite so far.
That's wonderful. You know, there are people out there who are horse people. And yes, if you're not a horse person, or if you don't know horse people, you may not understand how intense this hobby and I shouldn't even call it a hobby. It's a passion. It's an obsession. Some people might call it a sickness. I don't, but it's really, really intense.
Yeah, it is. My daughter's been riding since she was 6. Took a couple years off, and then since we've been back here in California, she is riding on an equestrian team, and it's intense. You know, you've got to have. We spend a lot of time at the barn. I ride a lot at the barn. Then we're traveling for shows that we go to, and we buy a lot of used equipment because it can be an expensive hobby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But and we just actually came back from Arabian Sport Horse Nationals in Idaho, which was our first national experience for my daughter and for myself. But you meet a lot of fun people with a lot of great stories, and it's a lot of good inspiration for me.
Yeah. And one of the, and I am not a horse person. I've been on a horse 3 times in my life, and evidently I did something wrong because all 3 horses politely invited me to get off. Well, they threw me off them. And so I haven't been back on. I've had better experience riding elephants than I have riding horses. But I do know people, there are people in my life who are horse people. And it's really, really intense. But it also, one of the things that I notice is that it's a lot of work. Riding the horse, actually being up on top of the horse, is a small part of that whole experience. There's a lot of shoveling of not too pleasant things and caring for. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure we have people who aren't horse people listening.
Yeah. So the beauty of the horse programs my daughter has participated in, and even as being a horse mom, you do things that you don't think you're going to do, like shoveling stuff. But there's obviously, if like us, we don't have a farm, so we have to board the horse somewhere. Mm-hmm. And because she is competing, we're at the barn multiple days a week for multiple hours. There's the brushing, the cleaning, vaccinations like your dog or your cat. Your horses need them too, and special feed and shoes. And the great thing about, like I said, the program that she's in now and the one that she was in when we were in Washington is they teach the kids to do all this. Mm-hmm. So when we travel, you know, there are barns that they travel with grooms and they travel with people that scoop and clean and whatever the stalls. But when we go anywhere, the kids and the parents, and we're all doing that. It's your horse, your responsibility. And they make a great connection with the horse that way because they're doing everything, you know. Like my daughter gives the horse electrolytes if the horse needs electrolytes, and it's in a tube that they squirt in their mouth. Or, you know, if the horse needs a bath, they're giving the horse the bath, cleaning hooves, putting blankets on, you know. So it's a lot of learning and doing, and, you know, depending on what you're showing. And my daughter does Western dressage, so she doesn't have to do a lot of braiding, but there are classes where they have to know how to braid the horse's mane and the horse's tail, and it's it can be intense.
Yeah, and we're not talking about grooming and bathing a Chihuahua. We're talking about taking care of a 800-900 pound animal.
Yeah, my daughter's horse right now, she's about 1,000 pounds. Yeah, they can be, and she's small because she's an Arabian. They're a little smaller than some of these thoroughbreds, but they can be even bigger. Like some of these Percherons can be up to 2,000 pounds.
Yeah,
I love when, you know, some of the people are like, "Well, equestrian's not a sport," and my daughter laughs and she always makes the joke about, you know, in football you have 4 quarters to perform. Mm-hmm. She has 4 to 5 minutes to perform. Mm-hmm. If she falls like 5 or 6 feet. You know, when you fall in football, you're falling like 2 feet. Mm-hmm. and you're controlling this 1,000-pound animal with your legs and your arms and sometimes your voice. Mm-hmm. And it's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I actually attended a couple of equestrian events with a friend of mine, and I remember, talk about being naive and clueless. I was at this one event, and one of the horses got loose and was very excited and upset and started running, and I stood in front of the horse. Thankfully, I'm going to stop. Thankfully, somebody else, or I think the horse turned down another alleyway. But my friend looked at me and said, "What were you going to do?" I mean, like, yeah. What did you think you were going to do? I still, like I said, I learn every day, but, I still sometimes wonder when something happens and you're like, that same reaction, your reaction is to jump in front of this horse, and you're like, wait, no, you can't do that. I imagine for any young person, but I'm an old guy, so excuse me if I'm gender stereotyping here. But I imagine for a young girl, it must be incredibly empowering to be able to develop a relationship with such a strong and independent animal, and to be able to work in partnership with that animal. I imagine that kind of experience must give the child a lot of confidence in other areas of their life.
I really believe it does, and it goes both ways, either for girls or boys, mm-hmm. Because you're developing a relationship with an animal, number one. Number two, you're developing this relationship with an animal that does not speak English like we do, mm-hmm. And so you learn a lot of lessons that can be translated into life. And it's also an experience like when I grew up in a small town, the kind where we played outside until it got dark. And when we're at a show, it's great because these kids are working together. And then, in the afternoon, there's some free time. They're either running around the showgrounds and meeting other kids and playing and having a good time. But then they're also coming back and doing what they're responsible for doing. And I just, it's a very powerful, I guess, lesson for these kids to learn.
And that whole experience of taking on a responsibility and working cooperatively with others, I've had the pleasure of doing this podcast and others, and we've been interviewing people for years now. And anytime I've interviewed, really successful business people, internationally successful business people, the thing that they always stress is, I can have somebody come in, I can train anybody to do a job in my company. But what I can't train them to do is to be responsible, to work as a teammate. I can't train mm-hmm. those things. Those are things that people have to learn when they're younger before they get to my company. And mm-hmm. this is, this experience where, as an equestrian, working, part of a dance team or, other kind of sports teams, that I think is a great way to help kids really kind of prepare to learn how to be successful in life in a lot of ways, just to get mm-hmm. out there and learn how to work as part of a team.
Yeah, that, and the one thing that we stress to our daughter, both my husband and I stress to our daughter, is, she is part of this competitive team and she goes and competes. But we're proud of her no matter what she does. Mm-hmm. If she places first, we're proud. If she places 15th in a class, we're proud. She does not need to win all the time, because she's winning by going out there and competing with herself, trying to better herself and her ability with that horse. And that's one thing I like about a lot of the equestrian teams we've been part of, is the focus isn't always on you have to be number one, you have to be number one, you have to be number one, because there are good days and there are bad days, and you have to be able to succeed in that kind of life.
Rae, there are a lot of, and we've talked a lot about this here on the podcast. I imagine there's a lot of, we know that there's a lot of parents out there who bubble wrap their kids, and they don't want their kids, no one wants their kids to get hurt. No one wants them to be disappointed, but it's a fact of life. But there are lots of parents out there who are bubble wrapping their kids. Their kids don't experience any kind of disappointment. I was, for a very short time, I was asked to coach in a soccer league, and I went from coaching a very competitive high school soccer team, and then when my kid was young, they heard about that, and they said, you have to come on and be a coach. And then I found out, we don't keep score. And that just kind of boggled my mind, and I'm like, well, you're not keeping score, but these kids are keeping score.
The kids do.
What is it that separates you from those parents, that where you're allowing your child to put herself out there? She's all by herself, so if she fails, it's all on her. Where did that instinct for you come from?
I think that's part of the way that I was raised, and I think my husband was raised kind of similar in that you don't always win, but you do and try the best that you can. And it also means you've got to practice, because there are, for some people, where certain things like soccer or equestrian or volleyball or whatever comes naturally. And there are certain people that it doesn't come naturally to. I played volleyball in high school, and I didn't make the team my freshman year, but I worked out every day. Even though I wasn't part of the team, I worked out every day with the varsity team, and the next year I made the team. And to me, it was because I really wanted to be part of that. So I worked hard, even though I wasn't the best. I wasn't the best server, I wasn't the best setter, I wasn't the best anything, but I worked hard enough on those skills to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what we encourage with our daughter, is that same kind of message to her. You work hard, do your best. You could win, you could lose, you could be completely last. But as long as you're putting the effort in, that's what's important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Remind everybody the other books that you've written. It's not so much a series, or am I right? Is it a series?
Well, I don't really call it a series because you don't have to read them all together. Mm-hmm. All my books happen to have the same main character, there's a girl and her family. They kind of appear in every one. The first book I wrote was called Cowgirl Lessons, and it's about a young girl who's taking horseback riding lessons. And then the second book I wrote was called Beach Day, and that's the family, and they take a trip to the Oregon coast, and it's all about their adventures of flying kites and building sandcastles and, kind of that beach experience and getting outdoors and exploring, because that's another thing that we've always encouraged. And I grew up in a small town in Northern California. I think I mentioned that. And my dad was in the Forest Service. So we spent a lot of time out in the woods and camping and being without running water, things that I don't care to do much anymore, but I encourage to explore. But even in your own backyard, there's so much to see. So that's kind of where Beach Day came. And then I wrote Cowgirl Christmas, which goes back to the equestrian team, and the girl and her equestrian team have been collecting gifts, and they go out and within the community, and they go out and they share the Christmas spirit, and they sing Christmas carols, and to me that's really important that we give back, and that's another thing that we encourage our daughter. She was in Girl Scouts for a long period of time. Now she's in FFA in high school, and so in between doing all this equestrian stuff, she really believes in working with the community as well. So that's kind of the message there. And then I wrote a book called Mountain Girl, which is the same family, and again they're exploring, but they explore a place up in the mountains, little small old logging town that's got lots of adventures outdoors. And then recently with Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse, the girl is going on an adventure, and it kind of ties a little bit into Halloween. So it works for a Halloween story, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just a Halloween book. Yeah. And then I've got another one illustrated, another Mountain Winter. I'm finishing up the writing of that, so that should be out here in the next couple months.
That's wonderful. And for everybody, you mentioned FFA. For those of you who grew up in the city like me, FFA, Future Farmers of America?
Yes.
Yes. So
she's very involved in that. She was actually, my daughter's a sophomore this year in high school, and she was the first freshman in their leadership class last year. They'd never had a freshman in leadership before, and she was the first one that. So as we say, she's found her people.
That's wonderful. Well, the one thing that comes across loud and clear, not only is it a love for horses and love for nature, but the one thing that I get from your writing is family.
Yeah.
And, that is one of the things that I'm imagining a family sitting down and reading Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse, or any of your books can sit down and even if they're not necessarily horse people or horse family, they can start to think about things that we can do together as a family. And
exactly.
That's just something, my family and I were the same way. My daughter danced. My son played sports, wrestling and football, and we were out there for everything, for the practices and the competitions, and and my daughter was at my son's competition, my son was at my daughter's competitions. We were, part of the family and part of the fundraising and all that stuff. And you probably, like me, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of energy, and it's a lot of money, but it's worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Rae, please tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse, and also find out more about you and what's going on with your career.
They can visit me online at www.rae, and it's Rae Rankin, RANKIN.com. And I do blog posts there. You can also find me on Instagram, Rae Rankin Author, and on Facebook, same thing, Rae Rankin Author.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse, Rae Rankin. Rae, thanks so much for being back on the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Dr. Peter Solomon. He'll be here to celebrate the Stardust Mysteries. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, we also want to make sure that you join us for Reading in the New Year. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. You don't want to miss it. It all starts December 25th, Christmas Day, runs through New Year's Day. Mark your calendar and be sure to bookmark the page, readinginthenewyear.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Rae Rankin. Be sure to check out Cowgirl and the Ghost Horse. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking to the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.